Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kirsten Witkowski, and I am an adult ed coordinator as well as an instructor at BREA. This year, I taught Intermediate 2 class. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the classroom applications to what Jamie just talked about, specific to our ESOL program. And we'll look sort of at 3 different areas. The first is how technology helped foster students' independent study skills. How we made our Zoom classes more dynamic with the use of tech tools, and how we use technology to carry out project-based learning remotely. So first, taking a look at those independent study skills. As Jamie mentioned earlier, we used Google Classroom as our LMS this year. And in particular, we debated for a while and decided that we are going to stick to using just the calendar view of Google Classroom. We were able to link all of the students' assignments within Google Classroom, as well as links to different Zoom events, all into one view. And we felt that this was a much more simplified view for students. They didn't need to learn how to navigate between different pages and tabs, and it was just a few clicks. And this was particularly helpful for our low literacy students, as well as, of course, any student with limited digital skills. And it had the added benefit of providing everyday calendar literacy practice for our lowest literacy students. And once students were able to open links, find links, they could then access everything that they needed for class from this one calendar independently. And we did, I will say that we recognized at the beginning of the year that we needed to spend more time teaching these digital skills. So we did sacrifice some of our dedicated English time during Zoom class for students to practice those skills during Zoom. And then, they had to repeat them every single day in order to connect to their Zoom class and complete their assignments. One aspect in particular that we really found helpful within Google Classroom is the view your work page from the students' view. This shows students a list of their assignments. It has the due date and the status of their assignment, whether or not they've turned it in and what their final result was. And using this view also helps students practice literacy, digital literacy, in terms of recognizing icons. So for example, they could see if their teacher had left a comment on an assignment. They could also see the status of their assignment, and therefore keep track of their own progress, as well as see what work was missing so that they could go back and make up missed work. And this was something that we had never really found an effective way to do when we were in person. So we really appreciated this very easy way for students to have all of their work in one place. And we made this accessible to them again by creating a calendar event on each student's individual calendar. We did have to log in as each student into their account and create that event for them, but it just showed up every week. They just had to do 2 clicks and they could easily navigate to this page. And finally, on that same calendar, we were then able to share resources for self-study. So we could post the Google Slides from every Zoom class directly on that day's column. So students who missed class could open up the slides and read through them themselves. And we could also post resources for extra practice on a weekly basis using digital tools that students were already familiar with, Quizlet, Kahoots that they could do as homework, or sort of repeat options for assignments that they could do multiple times. And again, this was really a benefit of digital learning because they had this all in one place, and some students really took advantage of this, and we saw that their language skills kind of took off with this independent practice. All right, so next, looking at Zoom class. There are a couple of tools in particular that we found really made Zoom class a lot more engaging for all students. So the first is sort of best practice to provide multiple modes of engagement. And we really tried to take advantage of all of the different ways that students could engage in class, taking into consideration their different levels of digital literacy, as well as the technology that they might be using that day to access class. So we might provide them the option to use the camera and use their fingers to answer a question by showing 1, 2, or 3, or thumbs up, thumbs down. They could also use their microphone. Eventually, they learned how to use the chat, so they could type either a message to the whole group or directly to the teacher. The higher levels did learn how to use reactions, and we did use some polls. That said, I will say that we really encourage students to use the Chromebook as much as possible to access Zoom class, because there are some limited functions using a phone to access Zoom. And once they were on their Chromebook, that also freed up their phone to be a supplemental tool. And so we could play, for example, Kahoot live in class. They looked at the screen for the question and used their phone to answer the question. Or they might reference a resource that their teachers sent to them in their WhatsApp class group in order to participate in a group activity, a speaking activity, something else during Zoom class on the computer. That said, I will say that students continue to access class on their phones. They might be at work or on public transportation. So I think, it was a practice that teachers were still always trying to keep in mind the different technologies that students might be using and trying to provide an alternative option for students that were on their phones during class. Our other major challenge that we encountered at the beginning of the year was how to continue to provide students with content in a breakout room when the teacher was no longer in every room to be sharing a screen. And we really found that Jamboard was the simplest and most useful tool to enable us to do that. So Jamboard is a Google version of a whiteboard that you can create. You can put pictures, you can put text on it. It can be manipulated by students, but we so far have only really used it as a view-only tool that they look at to either see the task instructions again while they're in the breakout room, or it might provide them with some sort of content for discussion. And we really liked Jamboard because it has multiple pages, and so it allows for differentiation and choice. And so the way we would use this is we would create the Jamboard and we would send the link in the chat so students could open up the Jamboard on a second window and then have that open as they went to their breakout rooms. So I'll show you an example of one that we've used from our intermediate 2 class of studying job titles and job duties. And so we sent them this link, and in groups, students had to take turns thinking of a job title and then describing it using the job duties while their classmates looked at this same page and tried to guess which word they were describing. So it enabled us to create a little bit more of an interactive game in a Zoom setting. Up here, you can see that there are multiple pages. So it also allowed students a little bit of choice. They could navigate between multiple pages, or students who finished quickly and did all of them on one page. It provides an extension for them to move to the next page and continue to do more. And so we really appreciate the differentiation of Jamboard. The other thing important to note about sending links in the chat, we needed to spend a lot of time teaching students how to switch between screens. So once Jamboard opens, they no longer see their classmates in Zoom. And so we luckily, since we gave everyone Chromebooks, Chromebook has a specific button, which we called the navigate button, but I think it's called show windows, which allows students to just touch a button on their keyboard and then select the screen that they want to see. And at our most recent conferences, this was the #1 skill that students mentioned that they really appreciated learning, was how to navigate between multiple screens. And finally, we used lots of different technology tools for exit tickets. We found that exit tickets, especially in the virtual environment, are extremely important because it might be the only time that a teacher hears individually from a student. And the students really appreciated having that space to know that their teacher was hearing from them individually as well. So while we did try out sort of the standard, we did Zoom polls, we used chat, some teachers created a Google form with a couple of questions, and then they sent the link in the chat. I will say the tool that we found most useful was Screencastify Submit, which allows students to record a very short video. So I'll give you an example of this. From a basic 2 class, this part right here, the image that you see here is what the students see after they open the link. It will open a website that has the instructions. So in this case, they were instructed to look at a page in their textbook and then just say the vocabulary words out loud. And all they have to do is click record, and then immediately it starts recording. Here's an example of one student's response to this exit ticket.
Get up, take a shower, get dressed, eat breakfast, eat dress, go to work, get home.
Okay, so you get the idea. And the reason that we loved Screencastify Submit so much and that we decided to go with this tool instead of the many other video recording tools out there are because it does not require any account, or students do not need to log in to access it. Anyone with the link will go directly to the recording page. The first time they do need to click a couple of extra things to allow their microphone and camera, but after that it's just 3 clicks. So we were always going for a limited number of clicks. And also it connects directly to Google Drive. So it was very easy for us to then use those same student videos and incorporate them into a class assignment, a homework assignment, made it really easy for students to listen and respond to their classmates' videos as well. All right, so that leads us into our final area of tech integration into our ESOL program, which was using technology for project-based learning. And this year, really the only projects that we did were video-based, because that's easier to do, and they were also sort of independent projects rather than group projects. So we will look at one example from our intermediate level class. A little bit of background, we were studying some vocabulary for different religions and different celebrations, and students created a video talking about one family tradition that they have, and then students then listened to and responded to their classmates' videos. So first, here is an example of one of our students talking about her family tradition.
Hi, my teachers and my classmates. Today I introduce about my family celebrates holiday. My family celebrates Eid al-Fitr April 12th. Eid al-Fitr is a Muslim religious holiday. We celebrate 1 or 3 days. We go to Washington, D.C. First Hijra Islamic Center with my husband, my son, and my parents. For that day, I will make a lot of Ethiopian traditional and sweet dish. For example, doሮ ወጥ, ክትፎ, ዳቦ, እንጀራ, cookie, and cake. Then my favorite thing is to decorate the house. Also, charity to the poor is highly emphasized value in Islam. That means it is a day of charity. On that day, I will giving gift to a neighbor. I think you understand about a little bit my family holiday. Thank you.
So by creating this video, the students developed these skills. So not only writing and speaking, but also using their computer webcam, learning how to record on a digital platform, editing and revising both their language as well as their video, so re-recording their video as needed, and finally submitting that finished project. And we did use the same tool, Screencastify Submit, for this project because students were already familiar with it. You could, of course, use something else like Flipgrid to do the same sort of project. And then we noticed something that we really noticed, aside from sort of the regular benefits of project-based learning, were that doing these videos in a virtual setting really lowered the students' affective filter. So many of them who might have otherwise skipped presentation day in person or have been extremely intimidated to present in front of their classmates felt much more comfortable recording individually in front of a camera. They could also have the option to keep their camera off. And so that provided a little bit more freedom and flexibility for those students. And many of them commented that it was the first time they had ever heard themselves speak English. And so it created sort of this awareness of their own language, as well as pride and self-confidence that like, I can speak in English for 2 whole minutes straight. So their self-confidence increased not just in English, but also in using technology. So at the end of this project, we asked them to reflect on 3 questions. What did they feel proud of? What was difficult? And what was their favorite part? So I will share just one student's reflection.
Hello. For me, I think it's difficult to speak in front of the camera, but the pronunciation too, because sometimes I don't pronounce very well the words, but it's okay. We are learning about that. Um, I feel proud, happy for my video. My favorite part when I watch the video finishing. I feel good. I think this project was very nice for all the students because we can practice more speaking English. We learn about the classmate. It's a good thing, a good project. It's very good.
To get a little sense of the student experience with the child crying in the background there. So overall, we got a lot of positive feedback from students about this project. And we hope to continue doing more of this type of project-based learning, even as we go back in person or move into a hybrid model. So just to sort of wrap it up, some of our biggest takeaways from this year in terms of making technology accessible to all of our students was first to use a limited number of technology platforms and really build up or increase that number with a lot of scaffolding. So making sure students know how to use one platform really well before we are adding on other tools, and then trying to use that same tool to accomplish a variety of different tasks. Second, always trying to limit the number of clicks as much as possible, as well as keeping in mind the repetition needed and providing differentiation for students at different technology skill levels. We also found that L1 support was extremely helpful, as much as we were able to provide that in terms of explaining how to use technology in the first language, as well as instead of teaching technology as sort of a separate skill or a separate class, using it as a tool for students to access and engage with English or with the other content, and that they really developed their skills much faster that way than the way we had been doing it in the past. And finally, as Jamie mentioned, that Zoom support role in the classroom was also extremely important in supporting the students that really needed a lot more digital support.